Welcome back. This is our fourth live online class, fourth and final. We'll talk in the end, once the camera's not rolling, about what we want to do moving forward. But we do have next week. Okay, so we have next week another class, which is not a live online, but it's in our class, in our WhatsApp classroom. Like I said last night, I want to shout out to those of you who've consistently been posting. I see it, I know it, I appreciate the wisdom that you've been sharing with us. So thank you. For today, if you go into the WhatsApp classroom, there's a file that's attached. I'd like to take a look at that as well as a Tanakh. So you want to make sure that you have a Tanakh with you. I know I say this every time, but the truth is, I don't know why we don't study more of Tanakh and less of everything else. I once worked somewhere, and for quite a while, I said, please, can I revamp your curriculum? And for whatever reason, the answer was no. But I always wonder, we're like junkies. We're always looking for another high, for another way of engaging people. And I see the flyers that come out. A friend of mine just reached out on Sunday. She said, can you help me make a title for a class I'm giving? Because I know you have good titles. And I recommended, why don't you just title the class what it is? She's like, yeah, but then nobody's going to come. Like, I need something sensational. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. We've programmed people to think that Torah boring, everything else sensational. So if I'm going to teach Parsha, it has to somehow come along with pizza and Parsha, because if I don't serve the pizza, nobody's coming for the Parshat HaShavua, right? It has to be, if I'm going to teach about Pesach, it's also going to be about, martinis and menorahs and Pesach. And it's our fault. It's our fault, meaning we've created a Torah that is, you see the Torah behind me? It lives in our own Kodesh. That's where it belongs. That's its home. But when we learn the Tanakh, and I have to say, when I grew up learning the Tanakh, there's a difference between holy, reverence, and of course, that's important, right? The Tanakh says that, right? If we consider those who came before us like angels, okay, so maybe we'll be like people. But if we consider them just regular people, then we are like chamorim, we're like donkeys, and not even like the chamor of Pinchas ben Yair, right? Because he had a very special donkey. The reverence that's needed is necessary. But there's a difference between reverence versus we create untouchables. We sometimes create a Torah that it sits in this glass that we're supposed to admire, kiss, and then walk right away from because it has no relevance to our lives. And I think it's a mistake. I don't think it's a unintentional mistake. I think it's very intentional, unfortunately. But we create this, on the one hand, this glorification of the holy avot, imahot, and that's important, that's good. But then the leap from, so we're so disconnected from them, and therefore nothing that they actually did is relevant to us, that's very dangerous. That's a very dangerous leap. I want to look at one more battle with you if I can. And I have to say I'm biased, because when I learned this in 5th grade, for those of you out there who are teachers, I think sometimes we don't realize what power we have. I had a 5th grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Pinter. Mrs. Pinter was probably one of the best teachers I've ever bumped into in my life. I still today, and I've been in 5th grade many, many years ago, I still remember the things she taught me, the songs she used to sing, the enthusiasm she came into the classroom with. I learned this, what we're going to learn today, first with her. And I remember as a young 5th grader, 9, 10 maybe, I remember thinking, wow, I never knew that my name is linked with one of the greatest leaders in Jewish history. And I said, I'm biased, but I remember from a very young age thinking, I want to be like Devorah. I know I have her name. And Halevy, right? We say, Matai yagiu ma'asai l'ma'asei avotai. When will my actions come? But I think it's a character that we don't always get to look at. And I want to take the time today with you to look a little bit at who is Devorah, who is Yael, what does she do? What is her model of leadership? In contrast and then comparison to a Sarah, a Rivka, a Rachel, what does it mean for us Jewish women? And then I want to take it to not just women, but What does it mean for different leadership styles, different boxes that we don't or do push people into? And is it really a good thing? So if you will, open with me to the book of Shoftim. Open up to the 4th chapter, so Perek Dalid. Let's start from the beginning. While you're opening your Navi, I'm going to ask you also to open up your file. I cannot recommend more highly this book that I already did. They have it both in Hebrew and in English. It's called the Dat Mikra Atlas. They have it, like I said, in Hebrew and English. It puts things into perspective. These maps they're not convoluted. They come on each side on the left with a little bit of an explanation, and then the actual map itself. I think in general, when you learn history, it's critical to understand where we're talking about. Where are we on the map? It also is maddening, because the more you learn our maps, you realize that this nonsense that's being peddled both by non-Jews and Jews of the Jews only came to Israel 75 years ago because of the Holocaust, couldn't be more ludicrous. Because every stone, every mountain, every rock on both sides of the Jordan have stories attached to them. Major stories, not minor stories of, oh, this is Aesop's fables. Yeah. So if you look at the map with me, we're going to be looking at the times of the Shoftim. Tell me who the Shoftim in general were. What time period are we talking about? Okay, so between what and what?
After they entered the land with Yoshua, and after
But before, very good, before what?
by Kishon.
Okay,
Yes.
very good, before the kings. So we're talking about this time period where Yoshua conquered the land with the Jewish people. Yoshua dies. We don't yet have kings, right? We talked about when Shmuel HaNavi comes to anoint Shaul. It's that in-between time period of Shoftim. Now, we normally think of Shoftim as judges. If you'll read, and we're not going to read it together, but I gave it to you, you could read independently, that the Shoftim wasn't just judges. It's simply a term that was borrowed to mean leadership. Yes? We have an interesting cycle during this time of the Shoftim. If you look at how it starts with the book of Shoftim, it starts with the word Vayihi. We know Vayihi always is a lashon of tsar. Always means
Bad news.
bad news. In fact, you find another Vayihi. Tell me which Megillah we read on Shavuot when most of us are sleeping and our eyes are closed. Which Megillah do we read?
Ruth.
Very good. We read the Megillah of Ruth, and it starts off Vayihi bimei Shvot HaShoftim. Yes, that whole story of Ruth takes place during this time period. Why Tsar? So it's a time of chaos, because though we do have leadership, yes, it's sporadic, it's not organized, and the Jews are going through a cycle. Yes, a cycle. It's interesting. Sometimes we learn nothing from our history. Yes, some people learn from their mistakes, some don't. The Jewish people, if you look at the time period of the Shoftim, it's the cycle of Jewish people are not following the ways of Torah and mitzvot. Hashem sends an enemy. Yes, the Jewish people then join forces. They do teshuvah. They gain leadership. They fight the enemy, and then they have years of peace. Years of peace and sova bring, it says, Vayishman Yeshoron. When the Jewish people get fat, what do they always do? Vayivat. Yeah, and they kick. Yafet, Vayivat, and they kick. Whenever things are too good, things are too quiet, things are just settled, we start making problems for ourselves. And this is a cycle that you see throughout the Shoftim very, very clearly, right? Where we make ourselves problems. I believe it is Shlomo HaMelech who says in Kehillat, Ivelet ha'adam, finish the pasuk, Ivelet ha'adam, tisalek darko, right? The crookedness of man is what messes his path up. We make bad mistakes, we make bad choices, and who do we always blame?
Hashem.
Vel Adonai yizaf libo. Always God's fault. It's never my fault. And I once was a camp where they had on top of the copying machine, they had a sign. It said, mismanagement on your end doesn't constitute an emergency on mine. You're always messing up, and somehow it's always my fault. Doesn't work that way. Yeah. But that's where we step in. So if you look at the map for a second, I just want to show you, if you can find Devorah, okay? So if you look towards the center of the map, between the words where it says Ephraim and Binyamin, and then Dan on the left side, that's where Devorah is stationed. Yes? Now, the reason that's important is if you go all the way north, literally to the top, her counterpart, Barak ben Avinoam, is all the way situated at the north by Kedesh Naphtali. Yeah. Those two are going to end up going to battle together in the north near Har Tabor, which is, you don't have it on this map, but if you look a little bit towards where it says Menashe, that's where a little bit to the left towards the sea. It's what we call today the Lower Galil. That's where Har Tabor, Mount Tabor in English they say. That's where that's where they gather for the battle and it takes place. So they have kind of that middle way entrance. But that's where I wanted to show you Devorah is much more central south, whereas Barak ben Avinoam is all the way north. Okay, so let's see what happens over here. Who is Devorah? What battle she fights? Who helps her? And then, like I said, some lessons for us. Look at Perek Dalid. ויוסיפו בני ישראל לעשות הרע בעיני אדוני. ואהוד מת. So the Jewish people continue to do evil in the eyes of Hashem. And Ehud, the leader from before, Ehud ben Gera, who fought Moab and ended up killing Eglon Melech Moab, right? He dies. וימכרם אדוני ביד יבין מלך כנען, אשר מלך בחצור, ושר צבאו סיסרא. So who now comes to oppress the Jewish people? Canaan, through the general Sisra. והוא יושב בחרושת הגויים. Okay? ויצעקו בני ישראל, right? So the cycle continues. There's an oppressor. The Jews are feeling the heat. ויצעקו בני ישראל אל אדוני, כי 900 רכב ברזל. Because they see that Sisra comes and he's not this little army, right? It's not guerrilla warfare. He's there with 900 chariots. והוא לחץ את בני ישראל בחזקה 20 שנה, and he's oppressing the Jewish people for 20 years. You know, it's important. Sometimes we get antsy when things take too long. I know many of us are feeling, especially now, it's 100+ days into a battle. And already the popularity contest has nosedived. Already we're hearing, oh, they're in there too long. What do they do? Chevra, America wasn't in Afghanistan for 2 days. Why? Vietnam ended in 1 year. Unfortunately, war, oppression, takes many years. And it also takes many years to undo. Yeah. Patience, we always say patience is a virtue. Patience is not just a virtue, it helps calm our nerves a little bit. Nothing's new. Oppression doesn't come easily, it doesn't go easily. So what happens? Udvorah, Isha Nevi'ah. So we have here that Devorah is a prophet, a prophetess. Eshet Lapidot. Now if you look into the commentaries, his name is not Lapidot, but he's a different conversation for another time. He shafta et Yisrael be'etahi. So she is not just the shofetet, the judge of the Jewish people. She's also a prophetess. Now, this is a really important conversation we're not going to have, but it should set off some alarms of, could a woman be a judge? What does it look like to have female leadership in the Jewish community? Have we, since the days of Devorah, even tried in some capacity to figure out, well, can we? Should we? What would it look like? Because clearly it existed. Yeah. And she's sitting under the tree of Devorah, ben Harama u ben Betel. So if you look at the map, she's sitting between the two cities of Betel and Ramah. Bahar Ephraim, so this is in the land of Ephraim. Vayalu eleh bnei Israel mishpat, and the Jewish people came to her. She's the leader of the generation. We know very little about her husband. In fact, we don't even know his name. Okay? There are commentaries who then will contemplate maybe Barak is her husband, maybe Eshet Lapidot is Barak, but it's not conclusive. Yes? Her husband is not as relevant to the conversation as she is. Yeah. ותשלח ותקרא לברק בן אבינועם. She goes and she sends to Barak ben Avinoam, Mikedesh Naphtali, all the way from the north. ותאמר אליו, and she says to him, הלא ציווה אדוני אלוהי ישראל, לך ומשכת בהר תבור. Didn't Hashem command, right? She's giving him now a nevuah. Hashem commanded that you should go to Har Tavor, and you should umashachta, yeah, and you should draw the Jewish people. How do you draw people? Once, when we were in a different lifetime, a different Gilgul, we were a synagogue in a synagogue. A very bad idea. Yes, it's never good to open the same thing in the same place. Imagine you had a grocery in a grocery. Yeah. One of the chief complaints they had is that we steal their people. And I remember saying, that is so ludicrous. People are not objects. You may treat them that way, and that's very telling of you. But how do you steal people? What does it mean to steal people? I'm not talking about federal crimes like kidnapping. Yes? You can't steal people. That's the answer. People go where they want. What you can do is you can try to influence people. You can try to draw people. You can try to appeal to people. Yes? That's something you don't have a monopoly on. People, thank God, are intelligent human beings, and they go where they want. And if the only way they come to you is through pure threat and terror, and that's how you steal them, so you're a terrorist. Yes? Normal people don't terrorize. So, Mashachta elav, he said, you should draw the people to you. To where? To Nachal Kishon. Let me see if we have Nachal Kishon on the map. I don't see it. I'm sure it's there. I don't see. It must be one of the rivers that are leading out of the Yarden, out of the Jordan. ומשכת אליך אל נחל קישון את סיסרא שר צבא יבין ואת רכבו ואת המונו ונתתיהו בידיך. So she's telling him, your job is first go to Har Tavor, recruit the Jewish people. Once you've gathered them, go down to Nachal Kishon, and that's where Sisra will end up meeting you. And I promise you, you're going to be victorious in this battle. What should the normal response of Barak be? Okay, right? If I'm being told I'm going to win this war, all I have to do is the recruitment, showing up, no problem. What is his response? Vayomer ele Barak. Barak says, no, I'm scared. I'm not strong. I'm not as strong as you. Im telchi imi, if you come with me, Devorah, v'alachti, I'll go. V'im lo telchi imi, lo elech. But if you're not coming, I'm not coming. I'm scared. I'm scared. Devorah, if you come, I'm going to go. If you're not coming, I'm not coming to the battle. By the way, this is, again, a fascinating conversation of Jewish women, femininity, East versus West. Yes. When I met my husband, it was the first time I bumped into a real matriarch family. Yes, I come from a very, whether I like it or not, a Western family where father's the man of the house. He sits by the table, right? A very nice man, but is the hierarchy is very different. When we were dating, my husband said, before we could even talk, I have to take you to Atlit. I said, Atlit? I don't even know anything about Atlit other than I think the salt in Israel is made there. He's like, yeah, that's correct. But also the major decisions in my family I made there. I said, really, why? Who lives there? Doda Esther. Doda Esther is the matriarch of the family. And unless you get a green card that you could even come into our family, you're not invited. I remember thinking, wow, that is so interesting. It's so interesting because it's a whole different dynamic. Yes, it's a whole different dynamic to come from a family of very strong female leadership versus, again, a very Western model. So here you have Barak, who, again, he in his own right is a leader. He says, no, I'm not going. I'm scared. Devorah, if you come with me, I'll go. If you're not going, I'm not going. Vatomer, she says to him, Haloch elech imach. Okay, I'm going to come with you. But you should know, Efes ki tiyeh tvartecha. You will get no glory of this war. Why? Ki biyad isha yimkor Adonai et Sisra. You should know, Sisra will anyway fall in the hands of a woman, not me. But the one who's going to be the history champion of this whole story is going to be a woman. So Sisra will fall in the hands of a woman. The fact that you went out and battled, if I'm going to come along, the war is going to be my war, not your war. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Vatakam Devorah, vatelech im Barak kadesha. Devorah gets up. She goes with Barak. Devorah is unafraid to say, look, I once saw a quote. It says, "Makom she'en ish." Right? What's the quote normally? When there's no man. So what would continue the verse? Very good. Hishtadel liot ish. Try to be a man. So I heard a quote. It said, no, "Makom she'en ish, tiye isha." When the man is not willing and able or capable to stand up and do what's right. So there's no wrong decision in saying, so we have to stand up to the plate. And that's what Devorah says. Okay. So Devorah gets up. Vatakom Devorah vatelech im Barak kadesha. So she goes, they rally the troops. What happens? Vayazek Barak et Zevulun vet Naftali kedsha. Vayal beraglav 10,000 ish. He manages to gather 10,000 Jewish people. Vatal imo Devorah, and Devorah comes along with him. And now we have a little break from the story, and it starts telling us about Chever HaKeni. Yes, Chever HaKeni, who splits off from the rest of his tribe, and he settles in Tzananim. Now, who cares? We care. Because very quickly we're going to bump into the wife of Chever HaKeni. What is her name? You don't have to guess? Very good. Yael. Right? If you look at Pasuk Yudalid. ותאמר דבורה אל ברק, קום, כי זה היום אשר נתן אדוני את סיסרא בידיך. הלא אדוני יצא לפניך. Barak, what do you, again, we're saying, similar to other battles that we talked about, this almost fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you you're going to be victorious. He promised you you will win the war. What is all this hesitation? Why are you so afraid? Why are you migamgem? Why are you stuttering, mumbling, falling over your toes? Devorah says, stop being so afraid. Get up, go out there, lead the nation in war, because you will be victorious. We will be victorious. Vayered Barak mehar, right? So he comes down from the mountain, mehar Tavor, ו10,000 ish acharav, and he has 10,000 people gathered together with him. Vayaham Adonai et Sisra v'et kol harechev asher hamachana, and Hashem makes the entire camp of Sisra and his people, they just get confused. They're hit by some kind of vertigo where they, north and south, east, they get this panic. And I believe it was President Roosevelt during World War II who said, the greatest thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? If you've ever had that feeling, right? How many of you ever felt that feeling of fear in your heart? Yes. People, lo alein, who suffer from anxiety. Most of what they're feeling internally doesn't match up to the reality of what's happening. Simply, their mind and heart are taking them on this awful trip. And that really immobilizes people. Fear is something that immobilizes you in ways that almost no other force could stop you. Yeah. Suddenly you freeze. Suddenly everything that's playing inside, everything that maybe could go wrong, now it feels like it is wrong. And unfortunately, it really is something that causes paralysis. Fear is something that can paralyze people, and that's what we see over here. Sisra and his army just go through this utter confusion, utter devastation, and they self-destruct. They fall apart all by themselves. What happens? So here the whole place is utter confusion, utter chaos. They're self-destructing. Sisra, the general of the army, he abdicates. Yeah. True leadership at its greatness. Unfortunately, during World War II, and I'm not judging, I'm simply quoting. One of my favorite authors is the Chovot HaTalmidim. Are you familiar with the book Chovot HaTalmidim? So this book was written in the Warsaw Ghetto. It was written in the Warsaw Ghetto. In fact, I believe Rabbi Dr. Henry Abramson. Very good. Rabbi Dr. Henry Abramson, who's the dean of Turo, wrote a really good book in English, studying the Piasetzner Rebbe. Yes? In his introduction, he writes, "The days of the Warsaw Ghetto are so dark and so black, I am not sure we will ever see daylight again." He says, "But I know that even if all of the Jewry in Europe is decimated, Israel will never cease to exist. And therefore I ask that when you find these manuscripts, send them to my brother in Israel, and he'll pay you." And he buries these manuscripts with many, many other historians in milk jugs. So we're not talking about glass milk jugs. You know the ones that the milkman used to bring, the stainless steel? And they buried them under buildings in the Warsaw Ghetto. After the war, it was discovered by some Polish gentleman. He opens them, sends these manuscripts. I believe the Piasetzner rabbi's brother, Rabbi Shimon, lived in Jerusalem, and he pays him. And he prints these books. I believe, you want to know what should be taught in school? The Chovot HaTalmidim. It's an incredible book for young students with an introduction, heavy criticism on teachers and the way they teach and the way they treat students. And he writes, so not in this book, but in one of his other manuscripts, he says he sees during the war now leaders who, in the height of the day, they could have thousands of people flock to them, throw their money to them before the war. And then during the war itself, when they had the first opportunity to run, they abandoned all of their chassidim, told them, "Don't worry, Hashem will save you. Hashem will be there for you." And then they themselves ran. They got their visas. They left. And they let all their chassidim perish. And he says, how in the world can you call yourself a leader? How in the world do you have the audacity that when things are going tough, to jump ship? Like I said, this is not me putting judgment as much as it's important that when somebody takes the position of leader, it means now you're the parent. And a parent cannot just abandon a family. It doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I see this quite frequently now, where for whatever reason, there are people going through midlife crises. And that's understandable. But suddenly they abandon all those who are near and dear to them. And who suffers? The people who never asked to be born with to begin with, the children. Always the children. Because if it's two adults who decide, hey, this is not working, we're going to separate ways, okay, that's two adults. When you take on the responsibility of being a leader, you don't just take on the responsibility of all the glory that comes along with leadership. In fact, there's a story about, I believe it's Rabban Gamliel talking to, I don't remember who the other Chachamim were, where they brought them to a city to be rabbis, and they don't want to come off. They don't want to come off the boat. They don't want the kavod, they don't want the honor. And I believe it's Rabban Gamliel who turns to him and says, "You're so foolish. You think that this job that you're taking is one of glory, is one of prestige, is one of honor." He said, you are now becoming a servant to the people. You are a slave to those who you serve. There's a reason that we call working with the public service. Right? When you sign up in a leadership position, you don't then suddenly to say, well, I'm done with the project, I'm tired. It's too bad. Then you shouldn't have signed up. Now, I'm not talking about events that are beyond our capabilities and control, right? That happens. Yeah, there's a reason that the airlines say they're called acts of God. Okay, they're acts of God. But when we sign up to care for people, part of caring for people is saying, I'm going to be there for the long term. In fact, one of the weirdest models, and I don't know if it's in Europe too, but in the United States, you see, I grew up in a world where the rabbi, the leader of the community, he stays the rabbi until he dies. And there's a tremendous amount of security in knowing your leadership is not going anywhere. Now, obviously, there are different problems. What happens when the leadership is corrupt and you wish they went? Okay. I live here in a world where I've seen in my only 10 years in San Diego, I cannot tell you how many people I've seen cycle through title rabbi. They have a contract, they're here for 3 years, and then they leave. They move on to something bigger, something better, something that pays more. And you have to wonder, how in the world should a community trust if you're only here until your next step? Right? What kind of long-lasting relationship could a community really develop with its leadership if they're only here until their next better position opens up? Vice versa. Why should a rabbi and a rabbanit invest their heart and soul when they know that if the board decides tomorrow they're going to be fired, they're out of a job? It's a crazy model of leadership where people don't have the continuity of knowing, well, they're here for the long term. They're going to be here for me, for my children, my grandkids. They're going to be here for the good things, for the bad things, for the weddings, for unfortunately, the funerals, everything in between. We're looking at a very sick model of general communities. So Sisra, maybe we follow the model of Sisra. He sees his battles he's losing. He runs away. Where does he run? Ubarak radaf am pasuk tet zayin. I think I want to tell this to you, not from here. So I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. What happens? Sisra runs away. He runs into the tent of Yael. Why does he run into the tent of Yael? Because Chaver HaKeni, they're friends. They're really allies. Yes. Yael invites him in. She covers him with a blanket. She says, Dori, lay down. He said, I'm so thirsty. Give me some water. What does she give him instead? She opens up this, we're talking about milk jugs. So these are the original milk jugs, the sacks, right, of the stomach of the animal. She pours some milk into his throat. He goes to sleep. And she goes outside, and what does she do? Tell me the story. What happens? I see your mouth moving, Machla, but I don't hear you. You have to unmute yourself so I can hear the story.
Isn't that she lures him and gives him enticement and dairy products, and then he falls asleep and she kills him?
Oh, so I don't know about the enticement. The pasuk doesn't say that. Yes, I'm sure there's a midrash that does, but if you look into pasuk, let's look at pasuk chaf. Vayomer elea, right? So Sisra comes into her tent and he says to her, Amot petach ha'oel, stand by the entranceway of the tent. Vaya im ish yavo, right? If anybody comes, usheelech, and they ask you, v'amar hayesh po ish v'amar ta'ayin. Just tell them there's nobody in the tent, right? They're obviously coming to search for me. You be my cover story. Vatikach Yael eshet chaver et yitad ha'oel, and she takes the peg of the tent. ותשם את המעכבת בידה, ותבוא אליו בלהט, ותתקע את היתד ברקתו, ותצנח בה. She goes, she takes the yated, right? She takes the peg, and it's pretty gruesome. Yes? She takes it. Now, for those of you who've ever gone camping, you'll understand what the peg is, right? You know those, so the ends of the tent, if you don't peg them down, tomorrow morning you have no tent. Yes? That's what you have. You have no tent. In fact, they say once Sherlock Holmes and Watson went out camping, and in the middle of the night, Sherlock Holmes wakes up and he goes like this, hey, Watson, look up. He says, what do you see? He says, wow, I see the sky. He says, yes, and what do you deduce? He says, oh, Sherlock Holmes, it's too late in the middle of the night for me to deduce it. I deduce that we must be millions of miles away, and there are some beautifully galaxies out there. He says, no, you idiot. What else do you deduce? He says, wow, I deduce that we are just specks of dust floating in a much greater environment with millions of other creatures in the world. And he looks at him and says, you idiot, what else do you deduce? He says, no, what do you deduce? He says, me? I deduce that somebody stole our tent. Right? If you've ever gone camping, you know that if you don't peg your tent down tomorrow morning, you're going to be on the other side of the river. Right? And the pegs, depending on what kind of tent, they can be very, very long and big. Yael takes it, and she drives it straight through the temple of his head, pegging him obviously down to the ground and killing him. She comes then out and announces to Barak, right, who is in pursuit of Sisra, I think I may know who you're looking for. Is there somebody by any chance you're chasing? He says, yes, of course. Did you see Sisra? She says, come into the tent, let me show you. And this is how the battle ends. So we're talking about 20 years of oppression. Yael ends simply by pegging down the tent a little bit harder. The Jewish people go back home. If you look at Pasuk Chav Dalid, Vatelech yad bnei Yisrael haloch v'kashal Yavin melech Kenan, ad asher hichritu et Yavin melech Kenan. They end up not just going on a defensive war, but on the offensive and completely smashing the opposition. I'm not going to do this today with you. God willing, we're going to do this in a different class. Shiviti Bet Midrash, the most beautiful song that Devorah and Barak sing together. And I need you again to think, how could it be? Because in today's Orthodox world, they tell you women aren't allowed to sing. Certainly not in front of men. Certainly not in front of the whole world. And yet this is already the second time we find women composing shira and singing it with the people. And unlike the story that they made up about Miriam, that she had the cymbals and they were making so much noise, over here, Devorah does not have any symbols. Okay? Devorah is making a song, and yes, I know Shira means prose. So, yes, it can mean the paragraphs, but Shira also means song. Yeah, Shira means song. Machla, you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself.
Just a quick question. When was it decided that women can't sing around men? Was it at the Second Temple? And was it like to do with putting the women in the gallery above? Like I'm just
So,
with this, Parsha Bo, and we're doing this.
okay. No, Machla, it's a good question. I'm not going to answer it because I'm going to throw back the question and say, is it true that women cannot sing in front of men? And that is a question you have to answer. You see, a lot of lies are made up, and then oh, wow, okay, I didn't know that. And we have to ask the premise, not answer their question. Is it true that women are not allowed to sing in front of men? If yes, if not, and in general, most answers will always be more nuanced than a yes and no. Yeah. So here you have Devorah. Devorah, the prophetess, the judge of the Jewish people, leading the Jewish people into a victorious battle with the aid of Yael. Yes. I want to look for a second so we talk about Devorah, and it's interesting because Rav Kook, I believe, he says very often, we push people. Now, this is a fascinating article that maybe one day we'll do together on Rav Kook's response to, during the founding of the State of Israel, should women be allowed to vote? Okay, so that is the conversation in context, and it is a fascinating conversation he has over there. But he juxtaposes it with somebody else we know, right? Tell me the first of our imahot. What is her name? Avraham Avinu's wife. What's her name? Sarah. Very good. Sarah Imenu. Yeah? Sarah Imenu. So for those of you who have ever gone to any schools, what do they always tell you that you learn from Sarah? If you open up your Tanakh, open up to Parshat Vayera. Okay, so it's chapter 18. If you look at Pasuk Tet, so Parshat Vayera, the 18th chapter in Bereshit, Pasuk Tet, the 9th chapter, the angels now come to visit Avraham Avinu. They're coming to tell him about the destruction of Sodom and Amorah, to help heal him, tell him about the birth of Yitzhak. And what do they ask? He feeds them, and then they ask him, Vayomru elav, and they say to him, Ayeh Sarah ishtecha, where is Sarah, your wife? And what does he famously answer?
That she's in the tent.
Vayomer hinei ba'oel. Where is Sarah? She's in the tent. Vayomer, and they say, Shov ashuv elecha ka'et, and they tell him the besora, right? They tell him what's going to happen, that this time in a year you're going to have a child. Rav Kook says something very interesting. You see, we always push women, and today it's interesting because there's a divide. Okay, so depending on where in the Jewish spectrum you find yourself, you get pushed either to be a Sarah or a Devorah. Yes, what do I mean? For those of you who grew up like I did in a very ultra-Orthodox community, you're always told, look, you see Sarah, hinei ba'oel, she's in the tent. Where do women belong? In the tent. They shouldn't be seen, they shouldn't be heard. Yes, they're extremely powerful. Yes. But the lesson is twisted because it's Western people teaching Eastern concepts. So I believe, yes, Sarah did not need the feminist movement, okay? She did not need to be emancipated, and I'm treading lightly. She did not need Betty Friedan to emancipate her from the role she was playing. Yes? Sarah Imenu, we know very well, was not just the wife of Avraham Avinu, but we know, just like it says, Avraham Avinu megayeret ha'anashim, right? They went out missionizing to the world. Avraham Avinu megayeret ha'anashim. Sarah megayeret et hanashim. Yes, Sarah was an equal...
She was greater than him in Nevi'im.
Yeah, yafeh mod. She was an equal partner in the family business of spreading the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So it's important, again, when we read the Torah, you have to read it from the Torah's eyes, not from a Westerner's perspective. Yeah. You then find, like Rachel mentioned, later on when Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, listen to Sarah, Shema bekola, listen to her voice. Why? Our Chachamim tell us because she was greater than him, b'nevuah. She was greater. Right? So Sarah was not this oppressed woman. Yet simply when we bump into her, she operates from a totally different perspective than a Devorah. Yes? Devorah, you don't even find Devorah ever inside. To the contrary. Where does Devorah sit? It doesn't say she's in the tent. Very good. She's sitting outside. She sits outside. She is the one who's initiating. She is the one who's leading the people in battle. She is the one at the forefront. She is the one who speaks. She is the one who judges. She is the one who is really running the Jewish army. Yes, the Jewish nation. And I think it's not fair because very often, again, depending on which community you come from, you either get very much pushed, and I say a fake Sarah, okay, because it's not the real Sarah, to this made-up concept of a Sarah who needs to be hidden behind walls and corridors and never to be seen or heard, right? And I say fake because that's not the true Sarah. Or you get pushed to be a Devorah, yeah? And I say, one second, if we're all about freedom and we're all about choice and we're all about non-conformity, shouldn't people be allowed to choose? Some people will always be a Sarah. Some will always be a Devorah. Some will be a Yael, who's a totally different person. Some will be an Esther. Some will be a Rachel. You see where I'm going with this? Some will be a Leah. In the name of freeing people's spirits, why do we then oppress them to be in just a different box? You see, just like I want to celebrate the woman who wants to have a career outside of her house, I also want the lady who decides to make her home her career to be just as celebrated. Because if it's really about freedom of spirit, then everybody should be allowed to choose the best box that fits them. And maybe I could be so radical to say maybe they don't need to choose a box at all. Because maybe there are parts that live in us. They're a little bit of a Sarah and a little bit of a Devorah. And at different occasions and different stages of our life, we fill different roles. But today, it's funny, in a world that's so intent on getting rid of any kind of boxes, all we do is put people into more boxes. So this box didn't fit, so now we created another few. And these few now don't fit, so now we're creating other ones. And I believe that the movement is not wrong in the push of stop shoving me into something that doesn't fit. I just think the solution is ridiculous. Yes, meaning those who are proponents of let's get rid of the boxes, I'm saying I agree. So then why are we creating just more boxes for everybody to fit into? Meaning if these labels didn't fit, why do I need new labels? Why not just get rid of the labels to begin with and let people be who they need to be? Why not give people back the freedom of spirit that they deserve? Because that's the way humanity was created. I want to read you two poems that, I'm reminiscing. So I told you about my 5th grade teacher. This was read to me by my 9th grade teacher. And I remember when she read it to me, it struck a chord in my heart that yesterday when I Googled it, I found it. So this was originally written in Spanish, this poem. I will not attempt to read it in Spanish, simply because my Spanish is so poor. Yes? But it was written originally by somebody, Alfonsina Storni, from 1892 to 1938, a famous poet. And it's titled Squares and Angles. So this is a translation, yes? The original is Spanish. For those of you who would like, I'm happy to send you the original. It goes, houses in a row, houses in a row, houses in a row, square, square, square. Houses in a row. People now have square souls. Ideas in a row and angles on their back. I myself shed a tear yesterday. My God, it was square. In a world that celebrates everybody's individuality and differences, we have created so many boxes that even before people die and go into a box, they have to live their whole life in one. And it's deadly because human beings and human spirits were not meant to be contained. When we talk about the human spirit being able to flourish, the human spirit being able to be a flame of passion, it can never happen in contained settings. There's a reason we always talk about, artists, they have such a hard time conforming. Yeah, you know why? Because if they conformed, they wouldn't be artists. Because if they destroyed their souls the way you wanted, there would be no more creativity to give to the world. So we struggle because they're so defiant. These people are such non-conformists. And we should look at such individuals and say, wow, you are the hope for our future. You are the celebration of life. Because what happens when we oppress people's spirits? I want to read to you another poem. So this is about a little kid. Yeah. Because we're good at it. We start at a very young age, crushing people. You know, when I used to teach high school, I always marveled how in kindergarten, if you ever go into a kindergarten and you ask for a volunteer for anything, they know how to do it. Who here can draw for me a house? Who here could sing? I need volunteers to sing. Who here knows how to build? They don't even put their hand down. They're not waiting for you to ask the question. They just know how to do it. You then 12 years later go into high school. You know, we have a school newsletter. We'd like somebody to write a little editorial. Is there anybody here that would volunteer? Suddenly everybody's looking at their shoes because they're terrified that you may catch their eye and think that they volunteered. We need somebody to represent this school and I always marvel, how is it that from kindergarten, where everybody could do everything, in 12 years of education, we've suddenly created human beings who can't do anything? And I'll tell you how. Once, a little boy went to school. This is by Helen E. Buckley. She was a famous author from the United States. I feel like, I don't remember when she lived, so I can't tell you. I think in the 1950s. Once a little boy went to school. One morning, when the little boy had been in school a while, his teacher said, "Today, we're going to make a picture." Good, thought the little boy. He liked to make pictures. He could make all kinds. Lions, tigers, chickens, cows, trains, and boats. And he took out his box of crayons and he began to draw. But the teacher said, "Wait, it's not time to begin." And she waited until everybody looked ready. How do you look ready? Right? You have now the inspiration? Wait. "Now," said the teacher, "we are going to make flowers." Good, thought the little boy. He liked to make flowers, and he began to make beautiful ones with his pink and orange and blue crayons. But the teacher said, "Wait, and I will show you." And it was red with a green stem. "There," said the teacher, "now you may begin." The little boy looked at the teacher's. Then he looked at his own flower. He liked his flower better than the teacher's. But he didn't say this. He just turned his paper over and made a flower like the teacher's. It was red with a green stem. On another day, when the little boy had opened the door from the outside all by himself, the teacher said, "Today we are going to make something with clay." Good, thought the little boy. Snakes and snowmen, elephants and mice, cars and trucks, and he began to pull and pinch his bowl of clay. But the teacher said, "Wait, it's not time to begin." And then she put him on Ritalin. No, I'm joking, that's not what it says here. And she waited until everybody looked ready. "Now," said the teacher, "we are going to make a dish." He liked to make dishes, and he began to make some that were all shapes and sizes. But the teacher said, "Wait, and I will show you how." And she showed everyone how to make a deep dish. "There," said the teacher, "now you may begin." The little boy looked at the teacher's dish. Then he looked at his own. He liked his dish better than the teacher's. But he didn't say that. He just rolled his clay into a big bowl again and made a dish like the teacher's. It was a deep dish. And pretty soon the little boy learned to wait and to watch and to make things just like the teacher. And pretty soon he didn't make things of his own anymore. And when I read these words, it honestly makes me cry. Then it happened that the little boy and his family moved to another house in another city, and the little boy had to go to another school. And the very first day he was there, the teacher said, "Today we're going to make a picture." Good, thought the little boy. And he waited for the teacher to tell him what to do. But the teacher didn't say anything. She just walked around the room. When she came to the little boy, she said, "Don't you want to make a picture?" "Yes," said the little boy. "What are we going to make?" "I don't know until you make it," said the teacher. "How shall I make it?" asked the little boy. "Why, any way you would like," said the teacher. "Any color?" said the little boy. "Any color," said the teacher. "If everyone made the same picture and used the same colors, how would I know who made it?" "I don't know," said the little boy. And he began to make a red flower with a green stem. Because the damage was already done. Because it doesn't matter if later on in life you bump into spirits that say, "Hey, let me free you from the oppression." You've already been programmed. We've already been programmed. Because the kid with a creative spirit always ends up in timeout. Always ends up in the principal's office. Always ends up somehow with detention slips. So we all learn very quickly, it's really good to listen. Because when you don't listen, or you forget to listen, the price you're going to pay is going to be very high. I know, because me and my principal were friends. I had a very smart principal. So we were friends. But you know who else got to be her friend? All the other kids like me who didn't get the memo that you're just supposed to sit and listen. Yeah. We didn't always get that lesson right away. That this is what everybody does. And if everybody does it, then it has to be the right thing. Because everybody's right. I don't know who that everybody is. I don't know who that sour lady or man that once sat on the board of ed and decided the curriculum and how schools... Have you ever been to a school building? Have you ever been to prison? They look the same. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that our schools are built in ways that look like prison cells, where we then send our children 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and if it's not enough, the prison comes home with you? Yesterday, I was sitting making octopus and sharks. Why? Because I have homework. You understand? Because 5-year-olds aren't doing homework. So now I have homework to do. Because the grasp of what didn't work for 8 hours now comes to your house also. And very quickly what we do is we take the human spirit, the tiny, beautiful budding flower, the beautiful creative soul that could have been anything when they were little, and suddenly we put them into these little boxes. And some people thrive in the boxes. That's the truth. There are some that they make their own beautiful box. They decorate their own walls. They hang up posters. They know how to paint it and get creative within their own little diagram. And then there's the other half that just dies in their box, but they stay there because they're afraid to come out. And they have a small percentage that's always breaking out. The problem? They're always labeled as the rebels. They're always labeled as the deviants. Yeah. They're the ones, the dregs of society. Who wants them? Who wants the people who, for whatever reason, can never get into line, shut their mouth, and just do what they're told? Yeah. Some of the people who break the rules, they do it with enough charm that they get away with it. If you have a good sense of humor and you know how to make people laugh and you're socially savvy, okay, so maybe you get away with just being different, right? It's a code word. I remember years ago, my friend was going to meet a shatchanit. I think there's a special place in hell for shatchaniot. I don't say this for no reason. Somebody recently called me, crying their eyes out. When I say crying their eyes out, they couldn't catch their breath. They said, "Vori, tell me I'm not crazy." I said, "Okay, you're not crazy." "What?" The shatchanit had set them up with somebody. And the boy got back to the shatchanit that he doesn't want to go on another date with this individual because she's too overweight. Now, let me tell you, this girl is no bigger than a size 8. Okay? So, I don't care what you say, but overweight this person is not. Now, that's not why the shatchanit's going to hell. That's why the boy's mother is going to hell. Because what kind of men have we created? You understand? What kind of disgusting human beings have you raised to tell? The Shatchanit then went on to say, I heard that today there have been different medications approved that you could take. They're shots once a week you could take, and you could lose weight really quickly. And that is why the Shatchaniot are going to hell. Because instead of looking at the boys and their mothers and saying, you are crazy for a community that all sheker achen vehever hayofi, right? We don't care. It's the inside that counts. It's the inside that matters. What's outside doesn't count until it comes to shidduchim. And then you can ask for 1,001 pictures of the girl because you have to tell which pimple and which beauty mark, and if her chin wasn't chiseled properly. What kind of nonsense? Chevra, we live in 2024. The rest of the world has gotten with a program that two human beings who like each other, who are compatible with each other, they can marry each other. Isn't that amazing? Only in the religious community is this kind of disgusting behavior still not just allowed, not just tolerated, but pushed by those who should be protecting the women. I'm deviating, but it's important. I had a different friend. She's part of, they call it a Shatchanim network on WhatsApp. So this famous Shatchan from North America, I'm not going to say which city, she said, she sees there's a crisis of single older women. She really wants to help. So she said, what, why don't I come to New York? Because New York is much more central, and we're going to help the women. And here I was thinking, wow, that's so nice. How are they going to help the women? For 3 days, they're going to rent. I feel like if I would be lying if I was making this up. For 3 days, they're going to rent a space in Far Rockaway. Why Far Rockaway? They didn't do anything wrong, but I guess they have a space over there. And the first day, they're going to bring nutritionists so all the women can learn how to eat more healthfully and they can diet. And the next day, they're going to bring hairdressers and makeup artists. And you see where I'm going with this? And when I read these texts, I said to my friend, what did you respond? She said, I personally didn't respond to anything in the group, but most of the Shatchanim thought this was an amazing initiative. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? I thought the initiative was we're going to go to Lakewood and we're going to go to Israel with baseball bats. And we're going to meet the boys. And it says, right? That's what it says in the court, that we're going to hit. No, I'm not encouraging violence. Simply, where does the problem lie? Not in the women. This is a problem of an education of mothers to the boys that they're raising. What are we raising? Ogres from Shrek? Or human beings that are really Talmidei Chachamim? But we live in a world, again, where we're allowed to create these boxes. And if the person doesn't fit, it's like Sdom. We're going to cut their legs. We're going to cut their feet. We're going to reshape them until they fit into the box. And those unfortunate souls who don't fit in the box, so let them stay single. They don't fit, right? Because they're different. Because different is a key word to mean crazy, right? Oh, you're so colorful. You know what you're so colorful means? It is not a compliment. Not in a religious lexicon. Oh, she's so unique. You ever heard those words? I did my whole life. You are so unique. Huh. Next, they mean special needs. They don't mean unique. You understand? Oh, she's so special. Oh, yeah, nobody wants to be special. Thank you. I don't want to be special. I just want to be me. But again, in a society that is so black and white, any sort of color is very dangerous. Any deviation may blow the cover for everybody else. Because if I could say, you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, I have a friend, her rabbi. Yeah, now again, why the rabbi is even looking at her, I don't know. But when she was in high school, her rabbi told her, your hair, the color of your hair is not snoot. You should really gather it up in a pony because it's way too out there. And I'm very proud because she turned to the rabbi and said, you got to take it up with the one who made it. Why? She had these beautiful red locks, okay? She was a redhead. And I'm thinking to myself, are you crazy? Aside for everything in the story doesn't make sense. When have we gotten to this place that all of us need to look the same? Even our hair color? Even the clothing that we're wearing? What kind of nonsense is this? And it's more than nonsense. It's dangerous. It's dangerous when we create a world where there's only one type of person. And you should know, unfortunately, it's not just the Jewish community that is plagued with this. There are very specific talents that are considered good. There are very specific personalities that people like. You got into the work field, it's the exact same thing. There are very specific jobs that we consider prestigious and very specific things that we don't. There are very, very square and clear rules that govern society. And I'm not saying that rules aren't good. Any society needs to have some kind of framework. But since when has the framework of society been so square that it really doesn't fit anybody? And what happens is, from a very young age, we educate people. You think you're different? You think you're beautiful? You think you're unique? You're not. You're not. You're just another human being who should pick up the crayons, follow the directions on the board, so that everything you draw and everything you create and everything that you desire fits into what we've already preconditioned you. And it's no wonder that we look at a world of sad, anxious, depressed, hurt human beings whose wings have been clipped. Because sometimes when I'll ask people, okay, so if you could break out of your box, what would you want to be? And the sad thing is, they don't even have an answer to that. Because they were never allowed to entertain the thought of, well, what if I was allowed to fly? Because from a very young age, my wings have been clipped. I don't know what it means to fly. How in the world can I paint to you an image when I don't even have those crayons to paint with? And that's dangerous. That's damaging. For those of you familiar with Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligence, right? And I see Machla, who is our pro on kindergarten and everything relating to young education. And I know you and I talked about this on my porch a little bit, where the human being was created, I believe there are 7 intelligences. There are thousands, if not millions of intelligence, because every human being was created differently. And it's time. It's time for us to look at the world and say, there will be some leaders like Devorah. There will be some leaders like Sarah. And there will be some leaders that are neither. But in order to get to a leadership position, in order to be able to lead, you first have to take yourself out of the shackles that society put you in. David HaMelech says, and I'm going to end with this. He says, Hotziam mimasker nafshi. Please take me out of the shackles of my soul, lehodot et shemecha, so I can praise you. Because unfortunately, the greatest shackles are not the prison walls, but they're the prison walls that live in our minds and our hearts. It's the ones that we've internalized, that society has from a very young age conditioned us to believe. Those are the ones that shackle us in ways that we don't even know. And often when we want to explore and we want to rethink things and we want to do things differently, we're met not just with opposition from the outside. The enemy outside, you know. Sometimes it's the enemy that lives within that has been so ingrained in us that to be able to say, maybe I could think out of the box. Maybe if for 20 years it hasn't worked, it's because I'm not being true to who I am. Maybe if for 75 years, right, I believe it was Mark Twain or Albert Einstein who said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Maybe if things have not worked for me up until now, it's because the programming is wrong. Maybe I've believed the lies, I've internalized them, and now I'm my own police. Last quote. One of the Lakota Nation, one of the Native American nation tribes said, the enemy has won when he can withdraw his troops because he has taught you how to self-destruct. That's the victory. When you don't need the external force anymore to self-destruct because they've taught you so well how to do it yourself. And I'm asking you, we've learned together. We're talking about war, external war, internal wars. This is not about let's go battle ourselves. It's can we go back inside and dismantle, I'm borrowing terms, can we dismantle the institutionalizations that we've been programmed to? And I'm asking you, don't break yourself, because we don't need a Humpty Dumpty that's now broken. Some things that the world gave us are phenomenal, and they need to stay untouched. We don't need to destroy everything. Simply, we have to be able to take the Lego pieces apart and say, this is good and this is not. This building is wonderful, let's leave it alone. This one needs improvement. This one needs to be demolished. And I believe that when we talk about emancipation, it has to first come from within. It has to be an emancipation of our own souls so that we can then go out to the world and say, I know who I am. I know what I am. I know which gifts I have. I've reclaimed myself. And now my mission is to go and help you do that. And Bezrat Hashem, I'm looking forward to a world where the emancipation and the freedom that we experience is not a selfish one. Rav Uziel, when he talks about his grand view of the Geulah, the redemption of the Jewish people, he says only fools believe that our redemption is a selfish one of the Jewish people want to go home and we're going to rule the land and we're going to terrorize everybody like they did to us. That's nonsense. The true redemption of the Jewish people is when we're able to redeem ourselves so that then we can free all those who are oppressed and terrorized and hurt and beaten. That's our job. But first, we have to start with ourselves. Bezrat Hashem, I'm looking forward to this journey. I want to thank you again